without much further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker this morning. Most of us in the room probably already know him. Former county commissioner, now the business administrator at the Croc Center. I hope I'm saying this right. And Republican candidate for the 16th congressional district. Let's please give a warm welcome to Mr.
Or the gavel.
That's in case I get too rowdy.
All right, very good. Well, I appreciate your patience in waiting for me. Originally I thought I would go to the pancake breakfast at the firefighters afterwards, but today is also the first birthday of the Croc Center. And so I need to make sure I get there before noon. So I decided to go to the pancake breakfast first, and as you might imagine, sometimes it's hard to exit the room without shaking a few hands. And so by the time I left there and then went to Moselle Hall, it was a little late. All right, so I appreciate your patience, and please forgive me for being here a little untimely. I think while I'm here, let me just tell you too, yes, if you'd like to stop by the Salvation Army today, it is their big celebration. So until noon, they'll be having all sorts of activities. You can even have a free piece of birthday cake if you'd like. So it's an exciting day for everyone there. And certainly that's an organization that's making a difference here in the county, and more people are utilizing it. So I'm so glad to be able to extend the first birthday invitation to the new Salvation Army Croc Center. Now, I think what's best, and I'll tell you, with it being such a small group, I'm tempted to say maybe I just need to open it up for questions, and you can ask about whatever you want, personal, professional, political, or otherwise. But since she is recording us today, maybe I better give you the usual explanation of why I'm running and who I am. First of all, let me just say it's an honor to have served you as an Ashland County Commissioner. Of course, most of you probably know me from that role. Nancy knows me from probably childhood and beyond, but nonetheless, grew up here in Jeromesville, moved to Ashland, went to Ashland University, and became, thank you, Bill. Thank you very much. Did you find the ladies? Yes. Good. Wonderful. Very good. Ended up becoming, leaving Ashland University and worked at ODOT for a short time, and then ran for county commissioner. Ran in the Republican primary, and of course when you won the Republican primary, you're not allowed to hold a partisan position to work for the state, so had to then move on from ODOT, and eventually then became a county commissioner. Thank you very much to all of the county residents who did support me. After serving 1 full year as commissioner, or 1 full term as commissioner, 4 years later was very fortunate to run uncontested. It was the first time I'm told, at that time I was told that 25 years that a sitting commissioner went uncontested with neither a Republican, Democrat, or independent challenger. So that was pretty neat, and I can honestly say it's much easier to win an election when you don't have an opponent. That's right. But nonetheless, we're re-elected, and was very fortunate. Yeah, exactly. Was very fortunate because we actually won that election by almost 80%. So even though we didn't have an opponent, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents definitely came forward and supported us. Then you probably all know the story. Here, 2 years before that commissioner term ended, ran for the U.S. congressional seat back in 2008. And at that time, even though our opponents spent more than $300,000 more than we did, and although he had the endorsement of every Republican leader and elected official in most every county, except for here in Ashland County, we were able to beat him 2-1 in Wayne County, 2-1 in Medina County, 3-1 in Ashland, and in Stark, his home county, came up about 1,600 votes shy out of, I believe, like 11,000 or so. And so at the end of the day, we were unsuccessful, but I think in many ways we accomplished what we needed to accomplish. Coming from the smallest county in the 16th congressional district, for years it was always said the candidate would always come from Stark County. After all, it was the population center. And in particular, because there are some very influential Republican donors who live in Stark County, and many of you might know who I'm referring to, it was always called their seat. They would be the ones that would decide who rose to the top and were elected to this position. Well, coming from Ashland, the smallest county, I knew you would have to do something different. Since I don't come from great wealth, and since I don't have a big name all across the district, I knew we were going to have to do it a different way. We were going to have to slowly chisel away. Build that support and relationship with the voters across the 16th district, not in the traditional format of sending 12 slick pieces of mail, but instead 3 or 4 years of handshaking, meeting, and talking and listening all across the district. Of course, you know the final result there in 2008. We came up about 1,600 votes shy. And out of 60-some thousand, that wasn't too bad. Here we are 2 years later. Of course, we saw that election. Unfortunately, it did turn over to the Democrats. And I think, quite honestly, that's the very reason why so many men and women are paying such close attention this time. Because we elected someone who is not necessarily voting consistent with the values or the beliefs of the people who do live here in the 16th district. So here we go again. Now, I'm going to just tell you right up front, the bottom line is we have made far more inroads this time into these outlying counties than we ever have before. And in particular, Stark County, which still remains a critical county because of the population, the good news is they don't have a chosen candidate this time. In other words, there's not someone who's risen in the ranks of the political world in Stark County. It's an open field. They're building all the candidates are having to build a relationship with the people in Stark County. And the good news is we started building that relationship several years ago. And quite honestly, for me, it's been very gratifying to see so many more doors open this time that were hard to open in the past because they had their own hometown favorite, which is understandable because most people would want their congressman whenever possible or congresswoman to come from their own backyard. So it is very exciting. And in fact, I have to tell you, these last 3 weeks, as we've gotten closer to the primary election date, you can tell now people are really starting to do their research and starting to talk and think about it because we can hardly keep up with all the sign requests and all the emails and people wanting to have house parties. I believe now until election day we have just about 2 or 3 events every night that individual citizens are putting together for us to meet their neighbors and friends. That's wonderful because let me tell you, 2 years ago that wasn't the case. And so we're excited about the progress that we're seeing here in the 16th district. Now, why am I running? A lot of people, in particular a lot of the political people, the party people, are the first ones to say, man, you should run for state. You should have run for a state office. You did a good job as commissioner, but you should run for state. Well, part of the reason why I am, first of all, let me just back up and say this. I am convinced part of the reason why you have so many ineffective politicians is because they work their way up through the system, pay their dues, supposedly, and by the time they finally get to the job that they were wanting, they're so watered down and compromised out that they're ineffective. Our last gubernatorial primary on the Republican side was a prime example. You had top-notch candidates, all 3 of them, Montgomery, Petro, and Blackwell, and yet when they worked their way through the system and it finally became their turn, it was hard for the ones that were good to get people excited because the passion was gone. It had been washed out after all the deal-making and the turn-taking and so on. And whether we want to admit it or not, that is what takes place. And I will tell you that that's probably one of the most disheartening things for me to see up close and personal is how much of that type of activity dominates the scene. And not only that, how much of a role money plays. There are plenty of good men and women in politics today. But what's lacking is courage. So few are afraid to stand up for the beliefs they have or for the principles they were chanting back here in our district because they're fearful they'll lose their contribution or they'll lose this endorsement or they'll lose this. Let's face it, this is exactly what John Buehler is facing. Here's a guy who actually probably is far more conservative than what his votes would tell us. Talk to him sometime. He sounds just like a Republican. But you know what? His voting would tell us otherwise. And why do you think that is? It's because his party decided he was their choice. They cleared the field, and they poured millions of dollars in his race. Now when John Buehler arrives in Washington, how's he not going to tell his leaders, I'm not going to go along with you, when they're reminding him that they're the ones that paved the way for him to be there?